Historians generally believe that Jesus was born around 5 BCE. A small following of Jews believed that he was the Messiah. This belief developed into Christianity. Christianity was generally tolerated in Rome, but Christians were sometimes persecuted. Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity around 300 CE. By the mid-300s, Christianity was declared the religion of Rome. During the Byzantine era, after the Visigoths looted Rome, there were Eastern and Western emperors in what was Rome. This division led to the creation of the Catholic Church. In 1204 CE, Crusaders captured Constantinople and defeated the Byzantines. In 1453 CE, Constantinople was captured by the Turks and renamed Istanbul. In 570 CE, Muhammad was born and went to Mecca around 630 CE, where he founded Islam. Muslims believe that Muhammad is the greatest prophet of God. The holy book, the Quran, contains 114 chapters of Islamic religion and law. In 640 CE, Omar establishes the Islamic Empire with a capital at Damascus. Eventually, this capital was moved to Baghdad. Omar Khayyam wrote the Rubaiyat. In 730 CE, Muslim armies conquered Spain and much of France. Caliphs ruled from 750 to 1250 until an army led by Genghis Khan sacked Baghdad and killed the last caliph. In 3000 BCE, Japanese islands had the beginnings of civilization. Mongols invaded Japan all through the BCE period. Around the 1st century, Chinese writers called Japan a backward nation. Shinto was the first religion to appear there, a combination of nature and ancestor worship. In 550 CE, Buddhism was introduced and spread throughout the country. During this period, Japan was still in China's shadow. In 1150, shoguns were considered the permanent leaders of Japan. Emperors only had ceremonial duties during this time. Japan was primarily a land of warring states. In 1600, the Tokugawa shogunate was formed and ruled Japan until about 1868. Christians were persecuted in Japan during this time, and foreign ships were forbidden in Japanese waters. This period of isolation lasted until 1853, when American Commodore Perry forced Japan to sign a treaty with the U.S., opening the door to trade. Feudalism lasted in Japan from 1868 to 1912. Feudalism was outlawed, and Japan became an industrialized nation. Samurais lost their power and importance in society. In 1876, samurai were banned from wearing their swords. 250,000 samurai rebelled against that and were easily defeated by soldiers with modern weaponry. Buddhism declined, Shintoism became more popular. Japan looked for opportunities in the West. In 1889, the first Japanese parliament was established. Charlemagne, also known as Charles the Great, stopped the Muslims in France. He ruled the Franks from 770 to 815. He was also named Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire in 800 by Pope Leo III. By 1066, Normans led by William the Conqueror defeated the Saxons at the Battle of Hastings. In 1066 to 1300, the High Middle Ages were in full swing. Roman roads were rebuilt, and Europe gained in size, much larger than the Muslim and Byzantine empires. England constantly battled the Danes after the Battle of Hastings. The late 1100s, Henry II had Archbishop Thomas à Becket murdered. Richard the Lionheart reigned as king. By 1215, the Magna Carta was signed, and 7 crusades occurring during this time, led by Richard the Lionheart, which were ultimately unsuccessful. England and France battled during the 100 Years' War, which lasted actually 120 years. Most of the war was fought in France. Joan of Arc led the French army to victory, but was burned at the stake at age 19. And also during this time, Chaucer wrote Canterbury Tales. The Black Death, also known as the bubonic plague, killed many Europeans in 1350. The disease was spread by rats. About half of the European population died from the plague. Early Chinese civilizations developed near the Yellow River. Between 1500 and 1100 BCE, the Shang dynasty emerges, known for art, bronze castings, and walled-in cities. Between 1100 and 250 BCE, the Zhou dynasty emerges. They're known for jade carvings and calligraphy. It is believed that Confucius was born in 550 BCE. He was a philosopher concerned with people's behavior. His teachings include respect for authority, self-control, conformity, and respect for your fellow man. He wasn't well known during his lifetime, but his followers traveled through China spreading his teachings. During this time period, the Qin dynasty rose, and the Great Wall of China was built. Confucius's writings were seen controversial and were destroyed. Between 200 and 220, the Han dynasty brought back the teachings of Confucius. In 315, invaders from the north began to attack China. They controlled China until 560. Southern Chinese settlements were better able to maintain their independence. Indian influences began to appear in China during this time. Buddhism was also introduced. In 580, the Sui dynasty was in power. By 618, the Tang dynasty overthrows the Sui. Turks tried to invade China unsuccessfully, and Chinese influence begins to grow in Korea. Between 960 and 1279, the Sung dynasty ruled, and they are most known for introducing gunpowder. Genghis Khan invaded and controlled northern China by 1215. Kublai Khan, his grandson, continued the tradition along with his descendants until 1368. China tries to attack Japan, but was destroyed by a typhoon. The Japanese called this typhoon kamikaze, or the divine wind. By 1368, the Khans were defeated. The new Ming dynasty crushed anything resembling the Khans. Contact with the West declined, and China closed its doors. By 1644, the Ming dynasty was overthrown by the Manchu dynasty. The Manchu dynasty actually reached out to the West, but quickly became offended by Western culture by 1757. They only allowed trade through Canton. Opium became the most prevalent export. The Opium War with Britain in 1839 occurred with Britain as the victor. The West continued to influence China through the 1900s. By 2500 BCE, early inhabitants of India were called the Dravidians. Floods and invasions destroyed this culture. Between 2500 and 1500 BCE, the Dravidians were forced into southern India by forces aligned with Greece and Persia. A caste system was established with the Dravidians as slaves. By 1000 BCE, the Mahabharata became tradition, which describes the life of Krishna, a war hero who lived a just and fair life. The concept of transmigration is introduced in the Mahabharata, that the soul through time occupies many bodies. Between 1000 and 500 BCE, the caste system trapped people. Priests and Brahmins were at the top, rulers and warriors were in the middle, farmers and tradesmen were next, and the bottom were workers. There were also those who did not have a caste, and they were called outcasts, or people who couldn't participate in society. In 580 BCE, Prince Siddhartha was born. His teachings developed into the Buddhist religion. Nirvana is a place of spiritual enlightenment all Buddhists strive for. It is the rejection of worldly and material concerns and surrender of consciousness. Between 320 and 185 BCE, Buddhism spread through India and into China. By 220 CE, the Antrahan dynasty ruled India. Buddhism then lost popularity and Brahmanism took precedence. Between the years 320 and 500, the Gupta dynasty took over. Art, literature, and mathematics developed during this time. Indian mathematicians developed the decimal system. Hinduism became the prominent religion. By the 5th century, the Huns invaded India. In 1200, Muslims invaded India, the Turks and Afghans. Delhi Sultanate lasted until 1530. Muslim sultans oppressed Hindus. By 1530, Mongols, also Muslim, came to India. By 1560, Akbar, a Mongol, sat on the Indian throne. He instituted religious tolerance, the acceptance of development of art and literature. By 1756, Mongols were overthrown and India became divided. In 1857, the East India Company of England steps in and rules India. A revolt ensues, which England wins. British rule was better than rule by the East India Company. Indian troops fought alongside British troops in both World War I and World War II.